Matt LaFleur is how old? I gotta start eating more vegetables. Welcome back to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I am your host, John Delray. Before we dive into today's topic, please hit like, share, subscribe on this video or audio podcast. You know, right after the game last night, the Packers' 27-10 win over the Chicago Bears, I dove on and just did a video of the quick observations, the quick hits from the game. Today, I'm going to dive in a little bit more fully with my top 5 takeaways from the Packers and Bears from Sunday Night Football. Before we totally dive in, hit like, share, subscribe, but also follow me on Twitter. That's at John Delray, Jondelray. And you can also now follow us on Facebook. Just search Lombardi Time Brews. There's a new page there. Yesterday before the game, I was putting out injury updates. Coming soon, there's going to be different stats every day. So go follow that page to get in on the ground level. Now, our top 5 takeaways from Packers versus Bears. Number 1, the run blocking is back, y'all. No, not just run blocking, but the run game. Coming off the horribly disappointing performance against the Minnesota Vikings, where Aaron Jones only logged 8 carries, all of a sudden, we decided to run the ball. And by golly gee willikers, it seemed to work. So, one thing that should not be taken for granted, in amongst the run game, Aaron Jones had an absolutely monstrous game. One of his highest PFF graded games of his career even, logging in an over 90. But the blocking, boy is it good having Elgton Jenkins back. In his press conference following the game last night, Matt LaFleur even said, if Elton's not back, we probably don't win the game. I think that might be a fair bit of hyperbole on his part, especially considering Elgton probably isn't going to be that happy with his own performance. As LaFleur indicated in today's press conference, that there were some plays that Elgton probably wants back. But first game back from an ACL injury, it's certainly to be expected as well. But the blocking grades for the 5 offensive linemen come in as follows. Yash had a total grade of 70. John Runyon Jr. also had 70, but had the highest pass blocking grade on the team at 86. Myers, 64.4. Newman at 49.6. And Elgton Jenkins at 58.5. Couple observations from here. One, like I said, JRJ with the highest pass blocking grade. Myers at 64.4. Myers, you know, his performance over these last 2 games, and we saw this a bunch as a rookie too, very inconsistent. At times, there are things that he does incredibly well. For instance, getting to the second level, especially on these new pin and pull running plays that the Packers are doing, that are looking pretty sweep-like, to be honest. The fact that the Packers are doing more and more of that and asking a guy like Myers to pull, he's doing really well at that. But at times, he still gets beat. At times, there's still the mental mistakes, like last night, when to snap the ball. Rodgers, after the game, basically said that was a simple mistake. Mental error. When he said it, he also wasn't really ragging on Myers. He was more just saying it matter of fact that with that snap that Christian Watson ran into as he was doing motion, Myers snapped the ball on 1 instead of 2. And that led to the timing lapse, and that led to ultimately the fumble. You know, even asking about that today, LaFleur in his press conference said that was actually supposed to be a counter motion. That Christian goes across, then comes back. Well, never got to come back because the ball was snapped. So Myers does some things incredibly well, but there are still some real flaws in his game too. Royce Newman, you know, we've seen this story. He's another player who has some experience, seems to run block well, struggles in pass pro. Yet last night it was the flip. He had a grade of about 71 in pass blocking, which was better than his run blocking grade. There do have to be some questions about when is it that are we going to see Zach Tom potentially upend Newman. Now, Tom at the guard position has gotten almost all of his work at left guard to really be John Runyon Jr.'s backup or even challenge, but Tom is ultra versatile. He was in college. They've worked him that way in the pros. You know he at least knows right guard. Are there going to start being some questions? If Newman continues to do an output like this, are there going to be some questions about whether Zach Tom should upend him for the starting spot? After all, Matt LaFleur and Adam Stenovich have talked extensively about we need the best five. No matter what position you play, no matter what you do well or don't do well, we need the best five. It's getting really hard to say that Zach Tom isn't a part of the best five. And in spite of these deficiencies from a couple of the offensive linemen, the run game last night was fantastic. Aaron Jones played out of his mind. The negative in this same spectrum is A.J. Dillon, who still had a productive game, but there were several times, and these aren't his fault, where he was running, especially to the right side of the line, just no progress was made. Gaining 1 yard to 3. Just stopped almost immediately when they would run behind that right side of the line. Now, Elton did some great blocking last night, but you also know he's coming back into shape. Newman, you got to wonder if that's where the problems are beginning to arise. So, ultimately, the offensive line last night was incredibly passable. In fact, pass blocking, it was more than passable. They only gave up 6 pressures, according to PFF, which is great. They created lanes. Myers got to the second level. But still, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the flaws or the potential issues that we can see coming, especially with Tampa Bay on the horizon next week. So, but ultimately, you have to be thrilled with the running game last night. Have to be thrilled with what Aaron Jones was able to do on the field. Sticking with the run game, but flipping it to the other side of the ball, woof, the Packers' run defense. It was rough last night. David Montgomery totaled 15 carries for 122 yards. That's an 8.1 average. His game for the Bears was almost as good as Aaron Jones' game for the Packers was. Completely and utterly inexcusable. Now, the Packers did completely shore up their pass defense. Justin Fields was completely hapless against them. Darnell Mooney was held to 1 catch for -4 yards. They didn't really allow Equanimeous St. Brown, former Packer, to do that much damage against them. So the pass defense was fixed. The pressure rates kept going. Coverages were much better. They were much more intense when they were in man coverage. But run defense, woof. Tackling in conjunction with that was rough. And you know, when Joe Barry was hired on last year, he said one of the top things was getting this team to tackle well and correctly. And for a lot of the time last year, they did. It was better tackling than we had seen in Green Bay forever. And then last night, it wasn't. And it wasn't last week either. You got to hope, because this is what Joe Barry specializes in, that that's going to get shored up and quickly. Lord knows they could use it against Leonard Fournette next week. So they got to fix up the tackling. That, in turn, will help solve the run game. But the run defense is still a concern. In conjunction with that, I'm going to throw in one more concern. And again, these are takeaways, so they're not going to be all entirely positive. But the amount of snaps being played by Kenny Clark, Rashawn Gary, and Preston Smith right now is getting high. Now, the Bears only had 41 plays from scrimmage last night. So take it with a grain of salt, because it's fewer plays. It's less overall plays. But still, Preston Smith played 90% of snaps. Rashawn Gary at 88, Kenny Clark at 88. That's a lot of snaps for the big guys. That's a lot of snaps for your premier defenders. Ideally, you'd like to see more of a rotation, but Kingsley Ngabare played 4 snaps. Jonathan Garvin played 4 snaps. The depth at outside linebacker either isn't doing enough in practice to show that we can have a rotation and not completely drop off. Kenny Clark has been monstrous through 2 games, but still, he's going to need to start coming off too. Last thing we want is that this team gets into November and then is just gassed. So are the Packers going to have to start shopping for reinforcements like they did with Whitney Merciless last year? I think it's more pressing at outside linebacker than it is for Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark seems to have more depth behind him that at least can keep things afloat while he's taking a break. Outside linebacker, last year we said it a lot that when Gary and Smith came off the field, there was a dramatic drop-off in defensive capabilities. We're seeing it again. Are they going to have to go out and get somebody? I would not be shocked in the least if we see that happening, and it may be a topic for another video later this week to talk about who could they go get, because the couple I talked in the preseason, they're still out there. Number 3 is a very brief one, and here it is. No new injuries. You love to see it. Anytime you play a pro football game, of course there's risk of injuries, and the Packers came away with none. Number 4. The offensive creativity. We talked in week 1 about, what is this garbage? It looked prototypical. It looked like the wide receivers were just having to beat guys one-on-one, and that's not what we're meant to do here anymore. Last night, though, we saw pin and pull run plays. We saw Aaron Rodgers run a read option, which LaFleur denied after the game was called as a read option, because who in the hell is going to call a read option for a 38-year-old quarterback? But Rodgers certainly made that choice. So, the creativity, using A.J. Dillon as a lead blocker for Aaron Jones, putting Aaron Jones in the slot with Dillon next to Rodgers in the backfield. It's just beautiful. How about the overall mosaic of the offense? I've been talking all along about how this offense is going to be the sum of its parts. The passing attack is going to be spread around with small numbers for everybody. And that's exactly what it was last night. Sammy Watkins, the leading receiver, with 3 catches for 93 yards. The vast bulk of those were on one play. But you see it now. You see 7, 8, 9 receivers a game getting 2 catches, 3 catches. Where is the ball going to go in this offense is what the defenders are going to have to ask. And that's a great thing for Green Bay. Mixing in the athleticism of the young guys with the veteran savvy of the old. LaFleur in his press conference today talked about how Sammy Watkins still has amazing burst and strength. That can be used. And we started to see it last night. That the mosaic, all of the parts, can come together and spread the ball to make a complete offensive picture. It's beautiful. Number 5, Preston Smith. Preston Smith appreciation time. Look, I mean, the guy just quietly goes and does his job. He doesn't get the accolades of Gary that he's starting to get. He doesn't have the notoriety even of Kenny Clark. I mean, mass amounts of Packer fans wanted him cut 2 years ago. And plus, there's this alarming pattern in his career that we've talked about before, that Preston Smith in even-numbered years just doesn't do well. Like every other year of his career. Look it up. Go look at the stats. Every other year of his career, he has a down year and an up year. And even years always seem to be the downs. Not so far this year. He is playing gangbusters. And not just rushing the passer. He's stopping the run. He's setting the edge. He is absolutely one of their most valuable defenders right now. On the tier with Jair, Kenny Clark, and Rashawn Gary. Incredibly valuable for the Packers. And what they are going to continue to need moving forward. Game ball most definitely goes to him. So, there you have it, my top 5 takeaways from the Green Bay Packers versus Chicago Bears game. A little bit more thought out, a little bit more elaborate than last night. Join me tomorrow as I continue to analyze this game before we start to turn the page over to their Week 3 matchup against Tampa Bay. Like I said, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow. Until then, as always, Go Pack Go.